Okay, long story short, I work with Agile 42. I'm one of the founder, also one of the coaches there. Pete asked me before, how many are you guys now? I actually don't know. We are a distributed organization. We work in 13 different countries around the world. And we probably are already between 40 and 50 coaches. We actually very unregrettably missed the 42. We could have made a celebration for the coach number 42, but probably we missed him. And I don't really know how many we are. So I'm here today to share with you some of the research that we are doing, especially in the context of organizational change. I'm going to share with you some of the approach we are using to do that, and I'm also going to present some customer cases, which agreed actually to be presented. We have many more than those. I will tell you a little bit the story how we came up to the result I'm going to share with you today. So this is me, officially Italian, but practically living in Berlin. Actually, to be more precise, I see more airports than anything else, as you can imagine. So I was last Friday in Boston. I flew to Zurich. Then I passed by Berlin to change the clothes. Then I flew to Istanbul, and I came here yesterday night. And at 11, there is a taxi waiting for me to go to Vienna, where I have a customer meeting this afternoon at 3. So the life of a coach can be quite challenging sometimes. But you need to find the right balance between work and life. I own a CSE and Certified Enterprise Coach and Certified Scrum Trainer accreditation from the Scrum Alliance. And I also own, which might be more interested, the Grill Master accreditation from the Weber Grill Academy, which can be quite useful at the weekend. And so what I want to talk with you today, in particular, we're going to talk about scaling, or actually not scaling. Why scaling? So when people ask you, I want to scale, or tell you, I want to scale, what should I do? The first question you should ask is, what do you want to scale? And which answer do you think we're getting when we ask that question? Well, every sort, specifically delivery model, process, more development, teams, all this stuff, if you think about the Agile Manifesto, are kind of contradicting the first value, which is people and interactions over processes and tools. We are trying to scale the wrong thing, maybe. And then you ask them why you want to scale these things. And what happens often is you see big companies telling smaller companies or startups, we need to scale because we have very large projects. We can do very large projects with small Agile teams. We need to scale. And the startup asked them, so why don't you make the project smaller? We never think about this stuff, right? So the excuse that we have big project, then we have to put more people inside is quite common in the enterprise world. And why is that happening? Well, most of the enterprises today, or the organization today, live in an environment, in a corporate environment, where the primary culture stem governing that organization is what we call hierarchy. Hierarchy is characterized by a strong focus on execution, on timely execution, flawless execution, efficiency, and has been optimizing on existing process and existing business flow for so long that people are just part cogs in a big machine. And also, using a hierarchical system, the problem is, in most of the organizations, the feedback loop is extremely slow. Every time something happens at the base of the organization, it takes weeks, maybe days, before it's actually coming to the attention of someone who can do something about it. Also, in hierarchical corporate environment, information tends to flow very much top-bottom, but not so much horizontally. And that's a big problem, because when there is a learning in a part of the organization, it might never reach other part of the organization, because through the ineffective way in which information flows, there is a lot of loss in between the exchanges. Also, a corporate world is fundamentally based on individuals. So there are a few new organizational models which are introducing more dynamic way of structuring around people, but most of the model we know today, even if it's here, we are claiming that we are trying to do team rewards or team review and team assessment and all the stuff, but fundamentally it's still an individual sport. Many organizations still have the yearly performance appraisal. You go there, you talk with people, you never seen them for 12 months, and all of a sudden you are evaluating or help them understand what are the objectives they missed and what are the ones they still need to focus on. And when we talk about corporate, we also talk about compliance. So the way corporations are ensuring that things work like they should is by checking that everyone follows rules and processes, okay? When we want to become agile instead, we are focusing more on teams. So Agile is fundamentally a team sport. It's not something that individuals can do easily themselves. There is another aspect about corporate. So why do you think most of the corporation, or in the last 5-6 years at least, they are starting to move toward a more agile way of working? So what is pushing them? Well, what is pushing them is the incredible market dynamic changes that happened in the last 15 years. So with globalization and the massive support provided by the internet infrastructure in the last 10 years, we discovered a lot of new business models. All the market which looked like consolidated in the past 10 years are being disrupted today and in the last 5-6 years by new startups who are able to provide effectively the same amount of services and quality of service as big corporation which existed in that market sector for years. And why is that pushing then this corporation to change? Well, because the expectation on the market is not anymore someone will produce what I need eventually, but people Google and they expect to find a solution in 10 minutes. Actually, they want probably options even. They don't just took the first available thing, they just don't look for the first available thing, but they rather search for options. This is how the mindset of the people consuming services and products changed in the last 10 years. So big corporations who failed to adopt their culture and evolve their culture toward this market changes are struggling a lot. So what happens today in big organizations, even medium organizations? Remember, there are also startups who are extremely chaotic. They start with the new ideas, and then 2-3 guys sit together around the table, and then all of a sudden becomes a product, and they get investment round, and they need to hire people. And they start hiring good people all around the world, but they lack the experience to build a structure which would make these people collaborate effectively with one another. So also in those cases, chaos is kind of the governing environment in the organization. So but what happens is that many organizations start piloting Agile. How many of you went through a pilot project? Agile pilot project. How many of those projects failed? None. One. Okay, there is always an exception. So why Agile pilot don't fail? Where's an idea? There you go. Who is doing the pilot project? First of all, are most of the time submarine unofficial initiatives, which everyone tends to keep hidden until they are actually emerging, and the results are so good that nobody can deny it anymore. And because those people are the ones who want to make it succeed, it will eventually succeed. There is a case, now Agile 42 is part of the Learning Consortium with the Scrum Alliance, which is an industrial initiative led by Steve Denning and other people at the University of Michigan as well, who are working on understanding how disruptive have been the impact of AgileEE in the corporate world. We visited Microsoft, and they told us that in the Visual Studio development tool, where they started doing Agile, it was actually hidden for about 2 years. So they were not allowed to say they were working Agile until the results were so obvious that all of a sudden agility has been accepted. We are always doing Agile here. We always did. We never said we couldn't do it, okay? So things change because people really want to make the change happen. So Agile pilots succeed, and what corporates do? They react in the traditional way. What is the traditional way of corporate? They copy and paste the success of one team to all the rest. So what they do, they copy processes and tools. And they say, now everyone does the same thing that these guys do because these guys succeeded. What do you think is happening? Not going to stick, right? What they are missing is that the development in terms of mindset, of culture, which happened between the people who first started removing impediment, challenging their status quo, coming together, understanding how to solve problems, all this development which brought them to develop the processes they use and the tools they selected is actually missing. So you can't just take the tools and the process and tell other people to use it. This is the old corporate mindset. This is also one of the major reasons for the one of you who read the version 1 report on the Agile adoption, which was released 2 or 3 days ago from 2016. One of the major reasons why Agile adoption phase or the blockers is that the culture of the organization is not ready to accept the new practices and the new tool. And the fact that it's not ready, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's making resistance to it. What it means is that they don't have the right glasses to read and understand what do those practices and tools mean. So if you are in the wrong cultural set and someone gives you in the end the tools, the behavior which are governing the way you are going to use those tools are going to be the behavior that you develop in your company culture until that moment in time. So you're basically going to do the exact same thing with new tools and new practices. Not exactly the same, but similar. And some companies are very happy just because they do a daily stand-up meeting all of a sudden, and 10% of performance improvement happen because people talk finally to each other. And they say, well, we have moderate success introducing agile practices, okay? But agility was never made for moderate success, was made for excellence. So coming back then to the core, what is the heart of an agile organization? What makes agile teams successful? Well, there are, in my opinion, 4 elements. First of all, focus on client and value. So what is it that we are trying to achieve? Which problem are we trying to solve, okay? And this is what is helped a lot if we use a pull system, a pull practice. Focus on client, pull staff, and understand what they want. Another thing which we want when we work agile is self-organization and autonomy. Why do we want autonomy? Because we want people to be able to react fast to changes. We want people to be able to decide on their own without having to go up the ladder of the hierarchy, escalating issue and waiting for somebody else to make a decision. And also, we want to work in an iterative and incremental way because it's a much better way of managing risk. We don't want to make long-term investment without knowing if what we are investing in is actually going to bring any advantage or not. And we also want to make sure that we build continuous improvement in our daily practices. And this, unfortunately, is one of the hardest things to do when you enter with agile approaches within an organization which has been governed for years from a hierarchical type of culture. Because for them, predictability and smoothless execution are the key to success. This is what hierarchical culture is mostly about. And the fact that we introduce an element of continuous improvement, which means we need to start measuring ourselves and evolving or experimenting new ways of improving, is a risky business. And when a corporate is too much focusing on predictability and regular execution, is extremely difficult to accept that people will make failure, that people will try things which we are not sure if they will work or not. And this is one of the biggest blocker as well, if you look at the version 1 report that I mentioned before. So now I'm going to present you as an example just the cases out of 3 companies. So one is Bubble, which is a company building application that allows you to learn languages, is available on the web and multiple mobile devices, and is a company, startup based in Berlin, where I officially live, and is a company which grew very quickly, and now are probably about 250, 300 people in Berlin, but also in the United States, and I'm going to share with you some of the cases we developed there, and also Ericsson, Mobile Core, and Siemens. So we've been working with Ericsson and Siemens for many years. One of the first presentations I held personally with the Vice President, Portfolio Management and Technology of Ericsson was at Agile 2012, so it's already 4 years ago. This is another Ericsson, it's not the same Ericsson, but we're going to share a little bit of the cases. So how do all this information come out? So at Agile 42, we developed the nice habit of documenting what we do. And we're really passionate about it, and we are really passionate about relooking at everything that happened and make relationship between all this data and trying to make sense of this information. And from the moment we challenge ourselves in making sense of all the things we learn and try to see if there were emerging patterns, we ended up using a lot of what is in the Kinevin framework. Do you know the Kinevin framework from Dave Snowden? Already heard about it? Okay. So it's a sense-making framework which allows you to look at information and create correlation between them and try to make sense of which type of value is hidden or which type of recurring pattern are hidden in there. By using this framework and some of the tools of the framework, we have been able to identify out of all the projects we worked on, which is probably more than 1,200 by now, a lot of cases or repeating pattern which were emerging as positive, as pattern that people liked and brought to positive result. And this pattern were following some principle which people found to be useful. So what are these principles and what are the patterns that we see emerging? Because this can be useful for you as well. So the first principle that we learn to value is to focus on small incremental changes. One of the biggest problems in traditional corporate change program is that they affect the whole organization at once, and also the amount of changing intercurring is normally significant, so that the learning curve, the time it takes to people to learn how to deal with the new way of working is significant as well. How many of you experienced in the last 6 months a reorganization? How about in the last 9 months? How many people? In the last year? Okay, so almost everyone put their hands up. Okay? Anybody has a stable situation for 18 months or more? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7. Look at that. 7 people. Probably 350 in the room. So they told me. So what happens then? Why organizations continuously try to reinvent themselves? Because they're realizing that the way they work doesn't comply anymore to what the market expectations are. So we try to reorganize ourselves continuously, but we don't realize that if we don't change the culture, the cultural set, which creates the context in which the strategy can work and thrive, we actually keep on innovating by putting new strategies inside, which our organization doesn't assimilate and doesn't understand. So you see people which are very frustrated of all these changes happening, and as soon as they are ready to take over their own responsibility, and they spend maybe 6 months' time handing over all the ongoing work that they already started, immediately a new reorganization has been announced. That's quite frustrating. And also the performance of the organization keep on spiraling toward uncontrollable and very ineffective ways. Also, the coexistence of old and new way of working has been recognized, at least according to our data, as one of the biggest causes of lack of productivity and demotivation. So the fact that people live for 2-3 months of their life and having to decide every minute which process should I follow now, the old one or the new one, and continuously need to switch context between one and the other, has been proven to be one of the major causes of frustration, demotivation, and also lack of performance. So how does a traditional approach to change management work? Normally, we start with an initial design phase where everything is going to be planned and designed up front, okay? And then once the design phase is finished, there is a thorough documentation phase. How many of you lived company transformation where you get a deck of 150, if you're lucky, up to 500 different slides explaining you how the new organization is going to work? How many of you lived that experience? Quite frustrating, isn't it? Nobody's explaining you much about it, but they go like, whoo, this is a new organization, okay? From tomorrow on, this is what is going to happen. And everyone goes like, what? What are you talking about? And the funny thing is that people gave up fighting. They gave up challenging, so what they do, they just comply. Oh, I changed the name, but I do exactly the same stuff as before. If someone asks me something, I answer according to what is written in the slide, problem solved, okay? What happened then? We try to roll out. If you're lucky, the management of the organization come to know about the new processes a bit earlier than the other, but normally they struggle a lot with the rollout. And the funny thing is at a certain point, what happens is fixing issues. What does it mean, fixing issues? Fixing issues means that we try to compensate for the fact that when the reality of the daily work of every one of you is confronted with the new design of processes and tools that you should adopt to succeed doing your job doesn't match, someone needs to come in and start tinkering around and making sure to change those processes to make sure you can deliver, okay? Because at the end, when you come down here, someone will start thinking about value again. And what happens? After a while, you fix the issue, you realize that the reason why the new process struggled to be accepted is because there are fundamental design flaws. And so what you do? You start again from there. And you redesign again everything, and you roll it out again. In period of your choice, between 3 to 6, 9 months time. This is how corporate behaves, and this has been extremely visible to us, at least, in the past 5 years or so. The problem is this approach is focusing on early standardization before stabilization, okay? So how should an Agile organization instead approach Agile change? Well, the pattern we have seen working at best is to focus only on a part of the organization which is having problem at the moment, but considering the whole at the same time to avoid to run into local optimization. Then you design by formulating hypotheses on how could you possibly solve that problem, and then you work with coaching. Coaching means that there are leadership people or internal people to the organization or even external people who are supporting the introduction of these new ideas, which needs to be validated through experiments. So we have an hypothesis, or more than one, on how could we solve that problem, and we want to run multiple parallel safe-to-fail experiments to see what are the practices which emerge out of all the teams or the group of people who are trying this new change out. Every time we roll it out, we document the result, and we try to share the documented result with another group who starts rolling out the same thing. And by rolling out in multiple iterations and refining the documentation, we come to a point where this documentation is actually good enough that other team can say, yes, this makes sense, and I can identify myself with it, and we can use it. And this normally happens in very short iteration, maximum of 12 weeks, okay? And then you keep on with the next part of the organization, and then you remember you need to integrate all the time back to what was built before. So this type of approach focuses on stabilizing and encourage emergent standardization, okay? So we are not defining and pushing, we are saying, these things doesn't work, according to our expertise, these are the things we might want to try to fix it, who wants to experiment? And then you start multiple safe-to-fail experiments. The results are emergent and shared between all the groups working, documented, and rolled out to the next group of teams. In this way, you have two big advantages. The practices are created in accordance to a common intent from the people actually doing the work, instead of people who never did the work or did it the last time 10 years ago, and they don't know anymore how to do it in detail. And the second thing is that you have close to no resistance at all when you try to roll out the processes, because the people contributed developing it. So there is no resistance to that. And there is also a much higher level of understanding on what is going on. There is a risk anyway. And this risk is that if everyone starts experimenting without coordination, there will be a poor learning in terms of organizational learning. So the risk is there will be actionism. People start doing their own thing in all directions, and then they're happy because they are trying stuff, and anarchy will come up very quickly. And what is the problem with that? Conceptually speaking, not a big one, but in terms of organizational governance, is scaring off many managers and leaders within an organization. Who is going to keep a common direction? Who is going to make sure that the learning of one group are reflected on all the other group? And in order to solve this problem, we worked a lot with many tools, but the tools which ended up being our choice tool is a tool that we developed, which is called the Agile Strategy Map, which is available, is everything Creative Commons and free to use, so you can use it whenever you want. But fundamentally, the strategy map is a way of managing non-linear dependencies between different initiatives within an organization. Actually, a lot of people use it to do product strategy as well. So you focus on what is the goal of the product, and then you identify what we call possible success factors, which are nothing else than leverages that you can use in order to achieve a specific goal, and out of which we are going to identify what we call necessary conditions. So what is the goal of the strategy map? Let's say your organization has a business goal for the end of next year. We're going to put that one in the middle, and we are going to find out in multiple workshops by asking different experts, what are the possible success factors that would help us achieving that goal faster? And once we identify those success factors and we formulate those in terms of hypothesis, what we are going to do, we are going to identify what are the necessary conditions that need to be in place in order to be able to experiment and validate that those hypotheses are actually helping us achieving the goal. This is how Siemens Motion Control, which is an organization of about 6,000 people, in which there is 1,200, 1,400 people of research and development, divided between software, hardware, and firmware, okay? This organization builds both motors and control equipments and steering systems for real-time supply chain developer, okay? What does it mean? If you think about your iPhone 6, the one I've just seen one there in the end, that one was produced highly by using Siemens technology. So guys who are building supply chains are using their component to control real-time about 64 to 128 different connected devices and real-time synchronize them so that the whole automation of the process happened. This strategy map was the beginning in March 2014 with the goal for the end of 2015, and these are the 7 major possible success factors identified, and these were the necessary conditions. What happens then? We started what we call improvement team. Improvement team are teams which take care of one of these factors and start to dig down, and you can see already this was June 2014, so a couple of months later, every improvement team started digging down and breaking the whole possible success factor in a series of experiments that would like to run within their organization to validate what would be the impact of this change in the organization, okay? At the same time, once the impact of the organization is validated and the pilots are successful, and I'm going to talk about this a bit later, immediately then you need to be ready to roll out the changes. One of the biggest mistakes we see all over again is that after the pilot phase, there is success. And the company is absolutely not ready to decide what to do with that success. And they start an analysis which might take 3 to 6 months, and in the meanwhile, the momentum and the motivation of the first volunteer who started that pilot is kind of going away. And that is where you lose momentum. You spend a lot of time kicking the thing off, and then all of a sudden things slow down again. So using the strategy map as an approach allows you to predict or look the development of all the concurring experiment and start thinking, okay, guys, if these things succeed, what would be the consequences of it? What do we need to prepare in order to be ready to roll out the changes when it's needed? Second principle, focus on value and organize accordingly. So when you come from traditional organizational structure, which is normally divided in silo or hierarchical, or even a matrix organization, what happens? That you divide concern in terms of competencies into silos, you coordinate those competencies normally with something like a PMO, and then you are coordinating the effort between all these different departments or line, call them however you want, and you are running project in parallel, hoping to deliver value to the client. I say hoping because most of the time the client isn't really happy about what you deliver. He's not happy because it's not exactly what he wanted, because it's most of the time not coming when he wants it, and most of the time it's costing more than you promised him. And still, in terms of efficiency, there's a lot of handover. So we learn from lean thinking that all this handover here, this stop and go, this handover of responsibility, which disrupt the flow of thinking and the flow of learning, is actually a major cause of waste. And what we do then, because we are running late here, and probably people are working on more than one project at the same time, because this is the way it is, we push on the line in order to get the project finished faster. This type of organization is optimized for utilization and not value delivery. In 2016, there are very few businesses which are still existing on the market which need to solve the problem of maximizing utilization to reduce production cost. There are very few businesses. Today, things such as the cost of delay means arriving late on the market is going to cost you much more than spending more money in research and development or in production, okay? And if you focus only on production, there are a lot of techniques you can still use to make it effective and efficient, but if you look today on the market, the focus is mostly on doing production on demand. So if you look at companies like Apple or Dell, they are actually doing production on demand and build to order, because another of the biggest waste we know today is building inventory. There's a lot of traditional companies who produce, look at car manufacturing company, they produce millions of cars which stays in a storage place for months before someone buys them. And this is all capital which is stored apart and is not generating any value. So how should an agile organization look like? Well, we said we want to focus on value first. So we start from the customer and we pull value, or we let the client pull the value, okay? But how we divide the value in a way that is manageable? What company tends to do is dividing their value proposition into value streams. Every value streams address a specific market, a specific target group. And within that value stream, we are going to create stable teams which can coordinate with each other if necessary, but they are perfectly able to deliver end-to-end value towards the client. This is what you know as cross-functional feature teams. The thing is, when you go in a big organization like Siemens or Ericsson and you ask them, hey, how many people do we need to put together to create a cross-functional team? The answer is between 70 and 90. So how can you do an agile team with 90 people? It's going to be difficult to self-organize. So we need to use other technique to work on competence, distribution and balance, to work on expert team, to work on service team. There's a lot of other structure that we know, but fundamentally, the goal and the drive is here. So what does it mean? That an agile organization tends to create a stable organizational structure in the direction of the value stream and creates virtual organizational structure like community of practice or guild across the value stream. So your organization is structured to deliver value, is not structured to maximize for efficiency and create projects which are temporary virtual organizational structure to deliver value. You see the difference in focus? It's like you take a matrix organization and you turn it 90 degrees on the side. This type of organization is maximized for value delivery and time to market instead of efficiency. Another way, or one of the tools we use the most to help organization focusing on value, because in theory is everything easy, but how many of you, if you go to your leadership team and you ask them to tell you exactly what is the value proposition that your company is offering to a certain target group on the market, how many of you will get a coherent answer to that question? Anybody? where you're lucky. You are the lucky 5%. Probably a startup or close to that is nodding, the other one not. Okay. So why startups are easy focusing on value? Because they don't have legacy yet, they don't have client or not many of them, and so they really know what they need to do, and the value is clear and transparent for everyone. Established company, because they are living on the value generated by existing products, they struggle identifying exactly where is the value for our client. And that's an exercise you need to do. So a way we found out to split big project into smaller chunks and focusing on value is by creating what we call opportunity canvas, which is actually a process. So is a way of helping, of facilitating an organization to refocus on what is the value. So this is an example of an opportunity canvas that we use for training purposes, but what really happens is that we drive and help organizations building their own form of opportunity canvas. And why is that? Because each organization has a different process which supports their decision-making in terms of deciding what do we want to do, why we want to do it, how are we going to do it, and then through the realization phase, tracking how is the progress going on, and finally, in order to measure if the value you planned is actually also coming back, you want to monitor the result of what you build. If you fail to monitor also at the end what you build is delivering the value expected, then the whole discussion about return on investment and business value is very futile. It's all opinion-based discussion, right? So if you're not able to measure how much value you're actually delivering and deciding, do we want to keep the product on the market or we take it away because it doesn't generate any value? And many times, we hear executives that say, well, we already built it, why should we take it out? Well, it still costs you maintenance, testing, evolution, and you don't make a single buck on it. So why should you keep it in production? Take it away. Taking away things from a product actually has the advantage that make product development more agile, because you have less things to change. The product architecture is probably simpler and more focused, and releasing new version is going to be an easier job than if you have a huge cluttered product with a lot of features that nobody knows. So let's have a look at what are the consequences when we work that way. So this is Bubble, and this is the value stream on this side. This value stream I try to read it for you, is learning, mobile, journey, payment, here, and I don't remember what was that one, but there are streams in which teams are working. On the other side, you see the opportunity canvas that I showed you before, business opportunity. They are ranked in terms of potential value for the company. And then there are 4 slots for preparation. Each of the canvas is put in one of the slots, and people start eliciting possible epics or story for each of these projects. You see they have different magnets with different colors to identify the priority. Priority 1 is yellow, then blue, then green, then red. Okay? Then what happens? Opportunity are ranked against each other here. You see that they are red, green, all the colors. And then the team pull in their stream the work they think they can do to contribute. And by looking at the color, it's easier for them to link back to the original dependency. And so when I'm working in this sprint or in this iteration on a yellow epic, these are only epic. There are all user story below. But on this level, I see I'm working on a yellow epic, and then I go and check who else is working on yellow epics so that we can coordinate and make sure we don't make mistakes. So it's all an emergent system. And this tells me end-to-end, and you see what is on this side? These are personas. These represent your target value stream. You always see the faces of the people as personas that your product and your feature are going to satisfy in terms of value delivery. And this helps significantly the team in making trade-off decisions, even during the implementation, to readdress what is the real purpose of the functionality. Okay? So Bubble works at the moment with probably, I don't know how many teams they have now, but more than 10, okay, distributed over these different value streams. And this is Siemens motion control, a different size. This is the largest Kanban system I ever contributed to build. It's 45 meters long. It goes from one wall to another wall and then another wall. This is just the qualification phase, okay? This is where The organization plans in stream. You see the 4 different colors here. And once all the policies here are fulfilled to qualify different business opportunity, they are ranked against each other. Then technical analysis, business risk analysis, and everything happen until they are ready to pull at the end of this wall. Later, I show you what happens when they're ready to pull. The idea is there a visible flow, and they use this to plan both their portfolio. There are over 395 million euro of R&D budget on this wall, on this side. There is more on the ongoing thing, and it's probably work for 2, maybe 3 years in there. Consider in mechanic, when we build new hardware and new firmware and new software, normally project takes 5 years, 5, 6 years sometimes. If you do a completely new circuit design, it's taking quite a lot of time to come to a point where both form factor, thermics, electronics, electrics all fit, and you can build a product out of it. So you need a lot of experimentation and iterations. And we manage to reduce significantly the lead time by working with an Agile approach, by having Scrum teams and Agile teams working in short iteration, even building hardware. I'm going to tell you more about that later. Third principle, decentralized control whenever possible. What does it mean? It means that tendentially, when we come from a hierarchical organization, we have a distribution of both information and power, which increases the more you go up into the hierarchy. Means the people up there are the ones who are in control. When someone down here needs something from that guy, is not even allowed to go directly and ask him. He has to follow the hierarchy. And so it's starting escalating, and that poor guy over there is so much busy, he's always in meeting, he never has the time to answer, and so what happens? Time starts to build up. And by the time this guy authorizes or come back with an answer, both these guys already gave up. Or, as is most common, they found a workaround. How many of you do workaround on your company processes all the time? Be honest. Okay, that's more like it. And why you do that? Because at a certain point, you just want to get stuff done. And it's not possible to get stuff done if you comply to all the stupid rules that someone else defined that it doesn't even know how to do the job. And what do you do about it? Do you rise up the end and tell your boss, hey, this process doesn't work, we should change it? No. Too much trouble to do that. You just shut up, do your job, don't tell anybody, and let it flow. This is the way it works. What is the drawback of this? If you go to executives and leaders, they tell you that their process works flawlessly because nobody reports exception anymore. Or when they report exception, the answer comes so late that it's not a problem anymore. And so what happens? What happens is what we call a reinforcing loop. So I report stuff, I never get an answer, so I wait forever, then I do a workaround. And on the executive side, they answer and they are initially concerned about the problem, but after a while they see that these people just complain. They complain the whole day, and then they go on anyway. So why should we bother in trying to fix things which are only in their mind? This is what they think. So you see, it's a kind of bad reinforcing loop. It's demotivating people, it's creating disconnection between what is actually happening in the daily work with what people think is happening and leading the organization. And this is a very bad situation. In fact, the whole organizational design is based on mistrust. What is mistrust? Mistrust means that because this guy here is responsible and doesn't trust the people down here, he wants to authorize every action which goes outside of their regular set of responsibilities and duties. And this is why we measure using compliance at this level, because it's the only way we have to make sure these guys are doing what they are supposed to do. How do we want an Agile organization to work like? We want to have the minimum possible hierarchy. Instead of hierarchy, we want to have coordination function. And when we want to have equal amount of power and information, how do we make sure that, again, there will not be an unmanageable distribution of information and ideas on how things should work? Well, we have to create what we call container for empowerment. What is a container for empowerment? It's a set of policies and constraints which allows a team or a group of people to focus on a common goal, but without breaking some specific set of rules that we gave. And notice I said we should write in there what the team is not allowed to do, not what they are supposed to do. Because if you write what they are not allowed to do, they are going to continuously challenge those constraints and trying to find ways around it, being creative, sometimes too much creative, but you can still have a constructive conversation. If you tell them, this is what you are supposed to do, you are encouraging compliance instead of challenging the group to find new ways of working. There's a big difference. So when we talk about policies and enabling constraint in an agile context, we are talking about constraint which help the team focus and understand what is it that they cannot do because it's going to damage or have impact on other part of the organization. When we adopt this approach, what we have seen emerging most of the time is a great pull for collaboration. People don't feel stupid or demoralized to go and ask for help. They don't need to go up to a hierarchy to their boss to tell them that they need to get in touch with someone else. They just stand up and go and get help immediately. Okay? It works again with the pull system. It's all self-organized autonomously and is much more effective because the feedback loop are much shorter. Problem is, in order to establish this type of collaboration, you need to start with trust. Starting with trust doesn't mean you say, everyone, we trust you, do whatever you want, but means let's sit together and understand how can I delegate to you power and responsibility without giving you too much at the same time. Many people in big organizations, they fear to get more responsibility because means the boss is trying to find a new reason to sack you. And so when they tell, can you do this instead of me, they all go, why should I do that? And you see the body language is immediately, no. You are trying to cheat me. There is something behind that, okay? So we need to build trust. And building trust is a bidirectional relationship. It's not, I trust you, problem solve. You need the other person to trust you as well. And to do this, normally what we do, we use things like situational leadership or pairing or stuff like that, so to establish trust and make sure that people know which constraint cannot be violated, that they have the enough necessary knowledge to be able to manage the situation, and that they are in the condition to actually act and have all the connection necessary to do the job. How does it come into concrete? If you look at team board, there are all the policy written here, or what the team is supposed to do or what not, on a portfolio level, for example, and this is a multiple team board also there. There are policies, and it's clearly written how things should go and what shouldn't happen and all the rest. And the team tries to organize and change the policies or change the way of working without violating the policies. And if they come to a point where the only way to get better is changing one of those policies, they are allowed to do it. They just need to raise a hand, call the people who empower them and say, hey, if we were removing this little policy here, we would be able to do this and that in that way and would be much faster. But there is a conversation which is growing based on maturity and trust. This is the Siemens we've seen before. With the huge portfolio and program system, they have 140 teams. Every one of these little square boxes here is one team. And every team has 3 magnets. One which is placed on the business opportunity they are working at that moment in time, and 2 which are used to allow the team to choose which other business opportunity, which is already being prepared in the portfolio, they would like to work on next. So the teams are allowed and are required to pull the next business opportunity off the wall, depending on their competencies, their knowledge, and sometimes also how much they want to challenge their own expertise in doing a new opportunity. And what happens then? They go to the portfolio, they place this little avatar on one of the business opportunity. The opportunity owner sees the badge of the team, and when he sees the badge of the team, calls the product owner, is written in there, and says, hey, when do you have your next grooming session? So I come to you, and I explain you, I pitch to your team the new business opportunity. And what happens in that grooming session, the team together with their product owner and the opportunity owner are creating a set of epics or ideas that would help solving that business opportunity. Of course, these are limited from the experience and the competence of that team. You see the color are signifying different area of competence. So every team has a different color, and the color highlights which type of team or competence this team should have, okay? Then what happens? The product owner and the opportunity owner look at this epics generated, they pack it to the opportunity, and the opportunity owner start looking at these epics and wait that the next team places their avatar on his opportunity. And then he goes and does the same again. And collect multiple options for different team, different perspective, so we are enriching much more the phase of defining what needs to be done, and then based on that, we are going to identify what is the minimal marketable scope and what is the target scope that we want to work on. Sometimes they even use design set-based approach, which means we work on multiple options in parallel intentionally to reduce the time to market and eliminate risk by choosing, based on result, the one which fit better to the purpose. First principle is about avoiding synchronization whenever necessary, and this is really, really hard. It's really hard because it is not safe at all to define a release date and try to push everyone, one project after the next, to finish by that release date so you can package everything together and ship it. This is one of the biggest dysfunctional anti-pattern of agility that we see everywhere. So don't tell me that release trains are agile, please. Thank you. He was waiting for it, yeah. So, what is the problem with this? We have a lot of coordination effort between these three guys. The first one starting is happy because he gets more time by the deadline to finish. Then the one starting later is going to take resources and people away from one project because his report says we're never going to finish on time. So what does the leadership do? Move people from here to there. Problem solved. Of course, those people didn't build the knowledge that these people built, and they're starting a project already midways, and they're more being weight to be carried around than actual people who can contribute to do anything valuable. And everyone is frustrated. And at the end, you need to meet the deadline, so what you do, you cut corner on quality, you start cutting the scope aggressively, and you release on time. And if you're lucky, on budget. But what you release is not what was meant to be, is not what the client wants, is not what is going to generate value. This is fixed scope and fixed date, okay? It's the least agile thing you can do. What do agile organizations tend to do? First of all, stop messing around with project, establish stable teams. Stable teams have a big advantage. Over time, they develop synergy. Synergy is that magic thing which happens between individuals that allows each other to compensate on each other's deficiency and very quickly solve problem by putting all the knowledge together. What they do, instead of thinking in terms of process, they think in terms of minimal marketable feature. So what is the smallest amount of value, chunks that we can deliver in order to validate quickly if we understood the problem. And in this way, they integrate every new additional feature on the mainstream of the product. So you can release whenever you want. If you want feature E, you have to wait this date. If you want to feature D, you have to wait that date. In this way, you also help the organization reducing the pressure on development because you can desynchronize the decision of releasing from the decision or the rhythm at which teams work in their environment. So the team develop using a continuous stream flow, and the organization can decide to release at any point in time, depending on what is the value. And notice we started doing this in Ericsson, and everyone got so excited that they had a full release with more than 120 teams. They had a full release of a single product, the mobile soft switch with a lot of options, and the sales guys were considering to make a release every month. But then they look at their service level agreement, and they had 24 months maintenance guaranteed on release. So they said, wait a minute, this means we will have 24 releases at the same time, which we need to maintain. Maybe it's not such a great idea. And so what they did, they said, oh, let's release every 3 months a new full version. And what we do, because we know we already have the feature, and we know it ahead of time, before an official release, what they can do, they can upsell an exclusive usage of a feature to a specific telecom in a specific country for the double of the money. And you already built it. Isn't that awesome? So, how do they work? This is a team building an hardware backend equipment. Is the first terabit fiber optic device for backbone for telecoms. And that big, huge cable mess there with a lot of components and a lot of test-driven development going on, also on hardware, is going to become a standard 19 inches rack equipment, which is about 60 centimeter high. But through the phase of development to test electricity, conductivity, and speed using some self-developed ASIC, what they did, they integrated continuously. So these guys basically work in that room despite when they were doing analysis session in smaller group. Then they made changes to the hardware, changes to the firmware, changes to the software, and for the first time, at least in their history, they were able to put a new device, a new logical device in operations in only 2 months after 4 sprint. So after first sprint, they were patching cable around and building firmware software. They've been able to actually say the device is ready, is connected to the network, and is transmitting data. Okay? Normally, it would take 6 months, 8 months, sometimes 1 year, depending on how complex is the device. So continuous integration and continuous delivery with test-driven approach is winning. It's an approach which emerges everywhere. At Bubble, they deliver features on multiple channels. When all the team finish on doing it on Android, on iOS, on web, they just flip on the switch, and automatically that feature is available on all channels. And they don't need to coordinate or synchronize, because every team developed at their own pace. When they're finished, they check it in, they say, we're done, and when everybody else is finished, then boom, flip on the switch, and you go. That code is distributed anyway, it's just not active. It's automatically tested already, but the user doesn't see it until it's activated, okay? Quite agile. And this one is a Siemens project that I'm going to share with you right after this. And the construction of the first programmable logic controller of 64-bit capability, okay, with 2 dedicated ASIC processor and the capability of managing real-time devices, I think 64 of them or 128. Last but not least, and then I'm done. Culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. What does it mean? We can have the best strategy in the world, but if the culture doesn't prepare the context for this strategy to succeed, the strategy will not succeed. And we'll have different outcome depending on the part in which is rolled out. What is culture in an organization? Culture is, this is how we do things around here, okay? And I would like to make a quick experiment with you. Can you all stand up, please? I make a cultural experiment in the room. So what I want you to do is keep your hands free, because you need them. Put the hands now along your arm and try to relax, okay? And try to be as silent as possible. What I want you to do now is when I clap my hand, I want you to, as fast as you can, put your arm on the chest in the relaxing position, as you normally do it, okay? You ready? Okay, you can do better than that. Maybe you're still sleepy. Try again. It took like 2 seconds. Come on. Okay, more like 1 second. Great. So relax again. Now what I want you to do, when I clap my hand, I want you to put the arm in the resting position, but instead of how you do normally, the other way around. Okay? Ready? Hey, what's going on? Too many beer yesterday evening? Come on, again. 5 seconds. And still people looking at which one is my hand. Are both yours, I swear. Okay, so let's see it again. What did we learn with this little example? What we learned is that if we consider culture to be that set of behavior which became recognized as the standard and established way in which we do things in our organization, they become an habit. They become part of your culture, okay? That behavior is natural, is muscle memory. When someone comes and tells you, hey, we decided that is not good anymore, we want to do it different. Everyone says, of course, make total sense. But still, when you are under pressure, your capability to react to changes immediately kicks in the instinct and the habit, and you keep on doing things the other way. This is why changing is difficult. This is why you need coaching, you need someone who observes you, you need someone who slaps on your hand when you do the wrong thing. Not because he's a bad guy, because you ask him to do it so that you can learn and change faster, okay? So if the culture is that, there are many ways to measure culture or profile culture. Some of you might know this is the competing value framework way of modeling a culture. So what we observe in all the projects we've been working on is that most of the company have tendentially a hierarchical orientation. So the cultural profile of most of the company is in the direction of executing flawlessly and timely. What we know also is that tendentially agile value and principle are more on culture which tends toward flexibility and discretion, so adhocracy and clan culture. So the problem is, how can we shift the company culture in that direction and make them aware of that culture because it becomes explicit so that an agile strategy can work? So what we do, we focus the organization on moving their profile there. And what does it mean? It means that some of the behavior which are here are not good anymore, and we need to expand other type of behavior. The way to do that is double. Number one, improving with storytelling and using stories from your own organization to explain how your current profile should move to another different cultural profile. You have an extreme advantage in doing this. First of all, awareness and alignment of everybody in the company about what are the behavior you want to amplify and what are the behavior you want to dampen. And second, ritualization of those behavior. So the best way to make sure people get used to the new behavior is by creating rituals. And it's not that difficult. If you think about the daily scrum, it's a ritual. You do it the same way every day, same people involved, is a ritual. This ritual fosters team commitment, the behavior that you want more, okay? You use a talking stick to make sure everyone talks at one time, because that is the behavior you want. So you can use a lot of rituals and coaching tools to foster the behavior. So through storytelling and ritualization, you can make the culture a weapon for yourself that you can use to actually amplify the learning and create the right context for the strategy to succeed. This is the final slide from Ericsson. What did they learn in 7 years through the transition? You see, it's almost all cultural change. Are you committed to how can we deliver? Planning at every level, trusting that everyone does their job, continuous flow of planning, and here, no contracts anymore between different parts. Stop this silly thing of cost center and profit center. Stop fighting for budget 1 year before you even decide what you want to do. That's just ridiculous in 2016, okay? Take it dynamic, roll on budget. This is Siemens. Strongly focus on principle, challenge the status quo, ran a project with 40 people, with 7 teams working in parallel. What we achieved, Innovation Award, because the project finished 40% faster with 25% less budget than expected, and they deliver beyond expectations. These are the 3 fingers you see up there, okay? And this never happened before, so they were very happy about this. I don't bother you with this one. You can find it online. This is how we captured all this learning in terms of principles and practices. Is a kind of double loop learning on an organizational level, which is one of the most difficult things to do. You need to assess and be able to measure yourself. You need to strategically plan what you want to change and why. You need to identify pilot project and define success and failure criteria. And then eventually, when the project succeeds, you decide to roll it out on a strategic level, reducing to the minimum the amount it will take to roll out the changes to the organization. It's like an agile team delivering on a product. Your agile organization delivers on organizational changes in small incremental steps, which allow faster learning, and also, as a byproduct, you foster a culture which is used to change. The people don't fear change anymore, because change is just what happens every day. But that change is controlled, is not having a disruptive impact, because it happens in smaller incremental steps. So what? Don't try to define how your agile organization will look like, because from the moment you try, automatically you're making a defined organization, which is not agile anymore. And scaling the delivery model won't make you more agile. We just had a more amount of agile teams delivering. And also, becoming an agile organization should never be your goal, but at best a means to achieve your goal. And this is another big failure pattern. Everyone comes, I want to be agile, and then you ask them why, and they go like, everyone does, so why shouldn't we? Become an agile organization is also a team sport on one side, but on the other side requires individual mindset change. So the first person you should coach is the one you see in the mirror every morning. That one. Who's that guy? Is you. Start from there. And then experience shows that there are recurring patterns and practices which emerge, so you can use them at your own risk, of course. And I'm done. Thank you very much.